This will be a little bit different. Usually when I make tier lists for like Rome Total War, Remastered or whatever, I usually go to like old quality games to like check to see if there's a tier list and then like, make the tier list basically based off of it. But in this case, I don't see any problem with like, his current tier list here. Like it's not missing any buildings. I can tell like, what the buildings basically are if like, having to like go around like see what they basically are, like, opening a tab and they're like, yeah, it's basically a building for whatever. I can tell what they basically are. So without further ado, let's actually use one of his lists for once to actually do a tier list. Much like before as well, I also go through these and like, make a little like, Google sheet to sort of like, decide like how I'm gonna rate everything. And, I'll note that for like the S to like F ranks basically over here, that won't be like as like, used over around this time around because basically it's got like a different sort of thing here, but it's basically the same thing for most parts, so whatever. So without further ado, let's get to it. The first three buildings are the governor's buildings, so Warriors Hold, Warlords Hold, and High King's Hall. And they're basically ranked pretty much like that, I think. Now, I'll note that you basically need these structures in order to like advance your settlement to like, get like access to other buildings. But in many ways, these are basically the most annoying buildings basically to sort of like, build. Essentially, like you have to build these buildings because they're like mandatory, but you can only build them when you basically get to like, the population requirements basically for them. And you also basically have to worry about like, going below the population threshold, like, you start building because you're going to try and build some troops or something like that. In many ways, the structures themselves don't really provide that much benefit really to you. Like you basically get like a small little bonus to like your happiness with like, the High King's Hall, but the other two, you just basically get like a dip map from like the Warlord's Hall, and then like the Warrior's Hall is just, you build peasants. That's basically all it's really used for. Overall, I don't really care much for these buildings. I mean, they're just sort of average and bad for like how they're basically done. They don't really provide any benefit besides like, being a stepping stone to something else, so it's like, yeah, well, it's like, whatever. Wooden Palisade and Stockade. Okay, so wooden Palisade. I think I'll put that right here, and Stockade I'll put down here in useless. So it's worth knowing that basically in this game, the Barbarians can't build like stone walls or better, and they're basically stuck with Palisades and Stockades. The Palisade is, it's an average little building that basically provides a little bit of defense for your colonies. Basically, enemies have to use like, siege equipment to actually breach the town, and if you basically like have a palisade basically there to stop it, they actually have to build a siege equipment. The stockade over like the palisade doesn't really add that much basically to the like defenses. It basically gives you like an hour turn to hold out, reinforces the walls and gates a little bit, so to take a little bit more to be beaten down. But overall, the like the wooden like palisade is like just like or stockade is just not that much of a real benefit to you. Spend a turn basically build a palisade because like it's useful to basically like give yourself one more turn or to like delay an enemy and like reinforce your like your lines so to speak sometimes. Not much more basically say than that. And we get down to our like infantry producing buildings, the mustering field, the meeting hall I think it is, and the Hall of Heroes. And have it written right there, so that's useful. And it's very interesting how I basically have this sort of set up because we basically have this up here, and this down here. And the reason I basically have it like, like this, where like, the second tier structures all the way down here and useless. The mustering field is basically useful because it gives you access to like, the Spear Warband. And the Hall of Heroes basically gives you access to Chosen Axemen. This just gets you access to like the just regular Axeman, and he doesn't really have that much like worth basically to in your army. At least with the Spear Warband, you'll basically build these to sort of like keep yourself alive, and you also basically like want to basically get like your chosen axeman like being pumped out all over the place. Actually, thinking about it more, if I should actually boost this up just a little bit more because Yeah, it is like that also in the structure basically. This is like, you know, oops, next color there. The thing about like the mustering field is that like, you know, the spear warbands, like you want to build them basically everywhere to sort of defend yourself. And just having like the ability to sort of like, you know, replenish your troops and stuff like that's important. So this is an awesome structure, I think, the mustering field. So that's something you must build in like all your summons. You just want to have like a defense, and this is even better like, in your palisade in some instances because like, you know, a spear warband is going to help you a lot more. Though in connection with like this is just awesome for sure. So yeah, there's that too. All right, stables and warlord stables. Where you build your cavalry and such. So I have 20 and 17. So I'll say that's better than that, I think. And warlord stables is honestly not that great. We'll throw it down here. So I'll note that barbarian cavalry in this game. The basic barbarian cavalry is like, you know, definitely one of my favorite cavalry units basically to like employ because it's just like, you know, a nice little shock troop that basically just does its job. I don't really care much about like noble like, you know, barbarian cavalry because it doesn't really serve a purpose in like the like Germanian's army. I mean, you might want to like build us a few of these or like make use of these if like, you know, you want to basically have a a highly replenished troop, so to speak, because Gothic cavalry is like a little bit hard to replenish, but overall this is kind of like bad to sort of like, you know, employ, so I can't really say anything much of like, you know, the noble cavalry for like the Germanians, because they just have Gothic cavalry, which is just better, so there's that. Practice range and archery range, so another bad structure, and, you know, a decent one. Do I think this is better than like, you know, Barbarian Cavalry? Probably not, so I'll put it right there. So I will say that the practice range is better than like these two things over here. So I'll note that basically like the, you know, the normal practice range you basically get skirmishers. And skirmisher warbands are actually like, you know, not that bad for Germania because they actually kind of like fit within their roster. So they're at least a little bit better than like, you know, the stockade or like, you know, the meeting hall. The archer range is definitely like a good structure to basically build as well because, you know, you get your chosen archer warband. And that's basically one of the best like archer units in the game, by the way, that you can basically get out of it. So definitely worth employing if you want to get to it. Though I find like these are sort of like the supporting structures, so there is that as well. You build these to sort of build supporting troops, which are like, you know, not like your main like, you know, focus bases Germania. You want to basically build your main troops to sort of like support you, but they aren't bad to build for sure. So, you know, average and useless. So higher and useless for like one of them. Blacksmith and weaponsmith. So blacksmith I rate as, you know, probably above the like, you know, High King's Hall, but lower than like, you know, the Palisade. Weaponsmith. The weaponsmith is definitely like, you know, the high, you know, the upper range of bad, shall we say, but not by much. The thing about blacksmiths and armorsmiths in this game, by the way, or like, you know, in this case, weaponsmith for like the barbarian factions, um, you really want to basically always be like pushing out and not really building troops basically in your settlement, so to speak. So these like structures, like, you know, they're useful if you're basically gonna have your time to like, you know, replenish your troops. But I find with Germania, I was basically always on the move, so to speak. So these structures are like, you know, they are useful to sort of like increase your like, you know, your troops killing capacity, but I never really have time to sort of like, you know, really utilize them. So it's always basically be on the move like your barbarian like troops and like, you know, I mean, if I basically like get like, you know, curve stomp, which, you know, rarely happens with Germania, it might be an issue, but it's just one of these things where like, you know, they just don't really benefit me that much. I find with like, you know, Germania's like sort of like gameplay. I find myself basically using like the enemies like, you know, armor smith or like, you know, Temple Mercury, or not Mercury, but Vulcan, stuff like that to sort of upgrade my guys rather than like, you know, building the stuff myself, so to speak, is a thing, right? So there's that too. That's basically it for like, you know, your mainstay, like, production and, like, military type of structures. Now we get to economics of, like, the trader, the market, and the great market. And I just realized I forgot to have mines in here, which are right at the bottom, so... Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's just get to the traders and stuff here first. So, here's where we actually start to get, like, some of our, like, our best structures in the game for, like, the Barbarians. The economic structures, really, for them. And I don't think that's really, like, completely, like, not understandable, because these are really important structures. The trader, the market, and then the great market, which is basically down here with, like, the weaponsmith and stuff. So I'll throw it right ahead, weaponsmith. So I'll note basically with, like, the basic trader in the market. Traders are very important for, like, the Iranian faction, because they actually, like, boost up their population growth. And early on with, like, Germania, you really want to basically get, like, your, like, tier 3 settlements basically online as fast as possible, because that's where you get the good stuff. You get, like, your sacred circles. So Donar, Woden, Gothic cavalry, and, like, berserkers. And of course, you also get access to, like, your chosen axemen, of course, chosen archer warband, stuff like that. But the thing about the traders, like, you obviously get that, like, population growth early from the start. So these are actually really important to actually build early on for Germania, as opposed to, like, say, like, the other factions that, like, don't really care about it as much. Markets is important because, like, you get your merchants, and you basically have to get your money basically somewhere, and merchants are a great way to basically do it. So that's very important for them. You also get access to spies, and of course, spies are important to, like, keep a bearing on stuff around you. Watchtowers are useful for Germania, but your spies are usually just a better, like, fit for it. So definitely get your spies and such. So overall, except for, like, the great market down here, these are very important. I will note that the great market isn't actually, like, terrible, but excuse me. The thing about the great market is that, like, you basically get assassins, and you get, like, some better, like, traits based on your merchants, but by the time, like, you're rebuilding, like, your merchants, that's not really basically, like, this thing is basically going to use for. And assassins are useful, but you don't really need a whole lot of them. So, you might build a few of these, but you don't really need much of them. So they're basically down here, like, bad. I do make use of assassins, like, now and again, because they're important to, like, kill off, like, enemy merchants, for example. But they're just kind of like, a nice little addition, so to speak, but nothing like, great. Nothing that's, like, completely great, so shall we say. Alright, port and shipwright. And these, of course, are just, like, port, shipwright. No contest really for that, I don't think. Well, I'll put that right there. So I'll note that basically, like, with Germania, you need to get, like, your money from somewhere, and just like basically all the other factions, trading is basically the way of basically doing it. Early on, I will note that basically, like, you don't get as much trades, like, say, like, the, like, Mediterranean factions, but you're still gonna get a lot of trade basically, like, Britannia and, like, the other guys, if you get the trade rates basically with them. And on top of that, basically, is the fact that, like, you don't really get a lot of money from like, elsewhere, so they're still gonna be important for that purpose. So it's just important. So just get your ports and stuff, of course, always. Note, by the way, for, like, Germania, they don't actually have, like, irrigate farming or whatever basically this one basically is. They have farms +2 because they never actually, like, coded it properly for, like, the game, and Remaster basically kept that, so there's that too. But whatever. Land clearance, communal farming, and farms too. So you have your land clearance. We'll put that right here, maybe. Now I'll move it down here. Land clearance is basically, it's on, like, the cusp of being, like, you don't necessarily have to build it, but early on you really need to get, like, your settlements basically built up. So it's important for that purpose. So yeah, it is, like, a must build in, like, your early settlements. Communal farming. It's important. It's definitely important. Honestly, I should have that right there, but whatever. Um, you probably want to build like maybe like some of these as well, basically in like your earlier like summons to sort of like get them like up and running because they're unlikely to revolt. So more populations is sort of going to benefit you, and you're going to get more money as well. And then farmers too. That's just another. It's down here. And that's basically it for like the bad structures, by the way, to like the farms +2 down here. I'd never like build these because at this point, like of the game where you basically have like your tier 3 like summons, you don't really have to worry about like getting the population up to tier 3. You already are at tier 3, and they're just like not useful basically for you at that point. So don't worry about these like these ones. You probably could actually put this down here and use this as well, but the main one you basically want to get is like the main like land clearance up here. So you get that to like get your population up. Try and get your like summons up to like tier 2 or tier 3. That's basically what this is all about. All right, roads. Now, I kind of debate if I want to obviously have roads being like this high, and I think I will, but it is with a bit of a caveat. The thing about like the barbarians is that they don't really need to have like roads to like really do stuff. Um, they don't really get any trade from like basic roads, and just to like increase their movement of their armies a little bit. But it's still important to still like move your units around, like in your like your like backyard, so to speak. So it's still like that basically going for it. I guess I want to say it's probably like as important as the wooden palisades, I guess. So I'll put it right there. But roads are basically just one of those things that like um, you build them if you basically need to, but so like transfer your troops around. And I found with like Germania, it's basically semi-used from like my mainland is basically down to like the ruined like Italian peninsula to attack them. So there was some importance basically to them, but it wasn't important like everywhere. And eventually like you get to the point where like everyone basically has roads in it anyways. So whatever. Okay, the Tavern and the Bardic Circle. Now, these units, these are like unique to like the Barbarian factions, and they basically sort of like a hit and miss sort of like type of building, so shall we say, for these like things right here. They are important to sort of build, but you want to be like building with like a grain of salt, shall we say. So I'll say the Tavern is probably more important than like the like Hall of Heroes. The Bardic Circle, where do I want to throw that? Um, I consider it more important than the Blacksmith. Do I consider it more important than Palisades? Probably not. Yeah, that's fine. So I'll note that with like the Tavern and the like Bardic Circle, these are like structures that basically increase your like population growth. They like help your like happiness a little bit. And when you get down to the Bardic Circle, they basically give you access to like the Night Raiders. But there is a problem with these like two structures here, and that's because they give you like your generals like bad traits. Um, for instance, they basically give you like the drinker trait, which basically means that you're like you're like generals obviously get like bad traits for like management, influence, and stuff like that as a result of that. I'll note as well, by the way, like you also get like bad like retinues as well because like you get like the slumber duggan or the drunken uncle, which are basically gonna hurt your like generals like in the long run too. So these like two structures here, you generally want to basically have them in like your far flung parts of your empire, which basically like are gonna have issues. But at the same time, like you probably want to have it like everywhere because like it helps if like your happiness and stuff like that too. So they're important, but you want to be very careful when you basically build them because they can give you like generals like really bad traits. So have to watch out for that. And then we get to the temples. Now, I looked at the temples for like the Germanian factions is very like interesting, shall we say, because early on you want to basically have like shrines of Freya in like all your like summons to sort of like get them to grow. So Freya is definitely like a must build like type of like structure. And yeah, I'll say that definitely like it's definitely like the lower tier of like must build, but it's still a must build like a must build like structure to sort of get your guys busy going. Um, the Sacred Grove of Phaedra and like the Sacred Circle, not as much those ones. Um, I'll note this is basically like on like the cusp of being like I would build it I guess because you can tear it down as opposed to like the like communal farming, but not that great. And then this is on the lower end, like why would you ever build this? I mean, you don't really need to have like growth in like your main settlements, and well, I shouldn't say you shouldn't build this. Um, the thing about the temples of Phrygia is that they actually do have a very important like function for your generals, and that's because they actually give them good retinues to actually work with. So um, you actually get like a really good like priestess of like Phrygia, and they get like nice traits for like management and stuff like that from like the temples as well. So they actually are pretty good for like a management type of like settlement if you basically go that far, but compared to like having like the sacred circles and like of Woden like and Donar, I'm not sure why you ever get this far. I mean you can, but maybe in like someone that like you don't ever plan to build stuff from, I guess. But when will that happen? I wonder. With Donar and like Woden, it's a little bit different, I guess. So Donar basically has. Let me select these right here. Um, the Shrine of Donar. I mean, I probably want to build that basically over this. Um, Roads, Sacred Grove of Donar. I'll throw that right there. And then this is basically just a gimme. So I almost consider this more important than like the ports, by the way. I mean, it's literally on that sort of like that's sort of like that's sort of like footing with these guys. Same thing with this right here. So I'll throw that ahead of Donar. Um, and then like Woden basically 20 and 21. So Sacred Grove, I always throw that right there. And then the basic temple right there. And I'll get to mines in a moment, but the thing about like the temples of like Woden and Donar, the basic temple for like Woden will actually give you like increase in troop experience, which is very nice. And then from like tier 2 and tier 3 for Donar, you basically get like 1 experience and 2 experience respectively as well. Um, the Sacred Circle of like Woden will actually give you like free experience, but you basically like, get it, so that's useful too. And that's like all like nice stuff we should have. And where these two like two like temple lines basically really shines like basically the sacred circles, where at Woden you basically get access to like the Gothic cavalry, and at like tier 3 sacred circle of Donar you basically get access to berserkers. And on that as well, by the way, you actually get access to like the naked fanatics at like the good phase of like naked fanatics at like stage 2 for like Woden, which like sort of throws us into like the good like marker for it, kind of. I mean, you can recruit, I guess, so I guess I'm up there, I guess. Now, I'm not basically like the temples. Um, Besides like Fraser right here, the other temples for Donar and Woden are actually very bad for your settlements. You'll basically find that you're actually gonna get Berserker from like the Berserker live like traits from like these like two temples, and they're actually really bad for your generals because when you basically get to like Berserker free, which is basically like the Berserker trait itself, they basically go Axe Bitten, Shield Bitten, and then like Berserker. Berserker will actually give you like negative like morale for your like, troops when you're basically nearby your generals, and it'll actually give you like a negative to like defending as well. So with like Woden and like Donar, you don't want to have like your generals basically being used for attacking at that point. So if you throw like generals basically into like the summons with like these like sacred circles and like sacred groves, you have to be very careful of like your summons being attacked, because those generals will not be able to defend very well. They will have to actually like execute attacks, or else like there will be issues. But the other benefits you basically get from the tops are pretty good, so they're decent. So I can't really complain with like, what you basically get out of these temples and basically get like, the profit you basically get from them. So there's that. But yeah, negative like 2 for like these retinues because they're bad, +4 for Frisia because they're good. That's it. What we want to basically take away from like, what are benefits and drawbacks basically these temples. Frisia, the thing about Frisia, by the way, is that like, it is useful if you want growth. And, if you don't want growth, then you can just tear it down and build like one of the other temples. And then get your generals basically out of that point, basically, for the most part, is the idea. Alright, so I forgot to put in like, mines. And mines are actually like, very important, I guess, for like, money making, I guess. So they serve a purpose. But where would I throw them? I'll note, by the way, you only get like a little bit of like benefit from mines, so well, one moment, I'm just gonna go quickly, like, just copy and paste from my Roman, like, tier list. So one moment. Alright, I did a little bit of work there. I basically went to like, the Roman buildings over here, grab them, copy and paste it right here. So these are basically like, what I basically have for like the stats for like the mines basically in the Roman like, sort of like, tier list I basically did for their buildings. And I basically said like, Wolf is basically pretty good for them. You basically get like, pretty easy procurement. You basically have to get like, your 2,000 like, population limit, and then like you start building them. Usage, can't say I really use these as much basically on like the Germanian campaign because they're just basically like, not really needed, I guess we'll say at least. Now, there is something to actually note about like, the Barbarian factions. They can't build Marians +1, so if you're just gonna try to like, build these like, mines basically in your summons, you basically only get like the first like, the first one. You know what? I'll say that basically they do actually help because you do get like money from them, and like, you basically get like, another source of money basically from these, and like, you don't get money basically from like other sources as well, so they are sort of useful mines for like the Barbarians, I guess. So yeah, you get wealth from basically from them. Where does that put them? Yeah, I'll put them right around there. Policies are 20, and then that can be like, right there. Mines is basically very average, I guess, for like the Barbarian factions, I guess, and particularly for like Germania, they don't have access to a lot of areas where you can actually build mines. You can build them, I guess, like, down in Spain if you get down that far, or if you go down to adjacent territories, but, I don't think they have a lot of, like, mine-located areas basically in their, like, heartlands or in the Gallic ones, so I never really found myself building them, and if they're, going, if there are some that could build mines, they were already built, so there's that too. Alright, well, there's basically a tier list for, like, the Barbarian faction known as Germania. I'll take a moment to basically like just save and download, so one moment, I'll basically do that right now. Alright, so there we go, basically just like, copy and pasted like, the information, this got ready to go. And here will be the final list for how I basically break down Germania's like, buildings compared to like, what's like, the best to build, what's not best to build. But, there we go. You're like, ports basically are at top. Most of your market's basically up here too, except for like, the Great Market down here, when like, the Great Market sort of like, drops off a little bit in importance. You got your Tavern, your Hall of Heroes, Temple of Woden. Other stuff basically down in the average category. Not really that much in the useless category. And you know what's something I actually really like about like, Germania? None of their buildings actually feel like they're useless for the most part, except for like, down here a little bit. But it's very balanced for like their like structures, much like their army basically is. So definitely like Germania's faction by a lot. Alright, well, that's it for this one, so take care.